Sunday, the San Antonio Spurs agreed to a trade with the Phoenix Suns to acquire Cameron Payne. Let's go ahead and break down this trade. What's up, everyone? This is Paul Garcia with Project Spurs. The trade, I am recording this video at 11:35 p.m. Mountain Time. The trade has not become official just yet, so if things change, you all know why I didn't address it. All right, let's begin. Campaign to the Spurs. All right, so as you can see here, I went a little bit different. Instead of using slides, I actually just used the some different app. Anyway, the Spurs are going to acquire Campaign. He has a $6.5 million salary that they are going to take into their cap space. They are also going to reportedly get a protected second round pick from Phoenix and also cash in the trade. So let's first talk in this little orange sticky note. Yes, sticky note. Let's talk about real time transactions. Where exactly is the Spurs' cap sheet right now at the moment? So in order to bring in Campaign, once they make this trade official, the Spurs are going to have to renounce Gorgui Dieng's cap hold. So I think that they've already done that because he's not appearing on their roster anymore. His name, and that happened last time when Romeo Langford, his cap hold was renounced as well. So Dieng's cap hold's gone, which means that the Spurs have $7.9 million available right now at this time to bring in Campaign's $6.5 million salary. This is also keeping Trey Jones's $5.2 million qualifying offer on the cap sheet. So I know if you've listened to Spurscast or watched some of my previous videos, I had thought that the Spurs were operating with Jones's lower cap hold, which would just be his free agent amount, and which they could re-sign him with his bird rights. But it looks like they're keeping that larger cap hold, so it's actually a little bit less cap space that they're operating with. Now, there is a chance until these deals get finalized that the Spurs can still open up to $9.9 million in cap space if they wanted to. Let me tell you how they would do that as we look at the green sticky note here. So the first way would be to waive Lamar Stevens. They haven't done that yet. He has a partially guaranteed $400,000 deal, and he needs to be waived by Monday. What is that? July 17th is what's been reported. So they may, by the time you watch this, he may have already been waived. Next, they would need to renounce Sandro Mamukelashvili's cap hold, and then they're still going to add him, but they would add him in the as one of the final signings. They would also need to figure out what's going to happen with Dominic Barlow. If he were to accept that two-way contract that they have a qualifying offer for him, then his salary basically gets erased from the cap sheet, and he's two ways don't count against the cap sheet. So that would help them open up more space. But again, right now they can't do that because they got to figure out if Barlow, what's going to happen with Barlow. So once they were to do all those moves, then they could finally, maybe they can make a trade to bring in another player at $9.9 million. Maybe they want to use that to go sign someone. Then once they've done that and figure out what they want to do with that $9.9 million in cap space, then they could sign Trey Jones finally and Sandro Mamukelashvili. Again, I don't know if that's how they're going to operate. It looks like they're not, considering that they've had Jones's cap hold at the higher amount, and they barely let go of Gorgui Dieng's cap hold. One thing I have on the yellow sticky note here is an aggregation note. So one thing I want to give some credit to Yazi Gosland of Hoops Hype. He mentioned is that the Spurs can aggregate all these new players they've traded for, so players like Reggie Bullock, Campaign, whenever he comes in, other players that they've acquired. They can aggregate those players into trade deals because those players were acquired via cap space. Usually, if a player is traded to a team, a lot of times it doesn't happen with cap space. So you can't aggregate that player, I think, for like 30 days or 60 days or something like that. There's some rule, but that rule does not impact the Spurs right now if they wanted to move some of these players that they just acquired, because they traded them into cap space. Next, I want to talk about where the roster kind of stands now that Campaign's going to be joining the Spurs, and San Antonio is going to need to make some waivers. So what I have here is on the left side, we have the Spurs' current roster, assuming that some of these players get signed. And then I have their positions according to Cleaning the Glasses data for the players in italics, like Sadie Sissoko, Victor Wembanyama, Serge Ibaka-Rice. These players, of course, didn't play in the NBA last season. So I've kind of just put them more so where I see them since I've been watching the games, and also where they've been listed on the box score. And so we see that the Spurs have a lot of guard. With the addition of Cameron Payne, they have a lot of players who can play the point. They have Campaign, they have Trey Jones, they have Blake Wesley, Devontae Graham, even Serge Ibaka-Rice has looked pretty good in Summer League there running the point. So they have a lot of options there at the guard. As I mentioned before, they have a lot of wing options. They have Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. Who else they got there? Let's see. Doug McDermott, Chetty Osman, Julian Champagny, Lamar Stevens, who might probably get waived, Reggie Bullock. So they have a lot of options there. And then, of course, the forward and the bigs. So where does the roster currently stand? We know that some players are going to have to be moved, whether that's via free agency. I mean, whether that's because of trade or because of getting waived. So right now, the Spurs have 18 players with full NBA contracts. Now, the only player with the partial guarantee, as I mentioned, is Who's that guy? Lamar Stevens. Lamar Stevens, yes. So again, they're probably going to waive Stevens, I would assume, on Monday, and then that makes it 17 players with full guaranteed deals. That means that the Spurs would still need to waive 2 players or trade 2 players before opening night in mid-October. So they have some time. They don't have to be in a rush to do this, but they are going to have to make some roster cuts, whether that's via trading someone out or waiving someone. Now they do have Serge Jabari Rice on that 1-2-way spot. They have 2 open vacancies there, and like Colin Reed and I said on a recent Spurs cast, we think that those 2 vacancies will go to Sidi Sissoko and Dominic Barlow. Just because the reason why I would say that is, even though I know Barlow had a really good summer league and Sissoko actually played very well as well, it's because basically, if they added Sissoko and Barlow to the full roster, gave them full deals, that means they would have to actually cut 5 players now. Because then you take the 3 that they need to get rid of already, plus 2 more additional players, and then you start looking at who are those extra 2 players that are going to get waived. Right now, there's those 2 vacancies for the players, Sissoko and Barlow there in the 2-way spots. So again, we'll see what happens. I think that's very interesting to watch, is that the Spurs are going to have to make a lot of roster moves before training camp begins. We'll of course wait to see what happens when Cam Payne's deal finally gets finalized, and then also when Trey Jones and Sandro Mamukelashvili eventually sign their contracts. So for Project Spurs, I am Paul Garcia.